Hi guys, Skypoint here. Now this video is coming out a couple days later than I would have liked, but I did want to take a moment to talk about the pretty big balance pass which the game has gone through 4 days ago, I believe, 4 or 5 days ago, within the last week anyway. Alright, so I'm going to talk through in order of the changes which I think made a big difference to the game. And the first one of those is to the Orphans of War, where Kirine's ability has been changed. It's had a very minor tweak, but before the patch came out, he used to steal a card from the enemy deck, and instead now he copies it. This, I think, goes a long way towards addressing people's complaints about Kirine before, because quite a lot of the time, if your deck build involved a particular combo of cards, Kirine could absolutely wreck that by stealing a couple of key cards that you really need for your combos, and he would badly disable many decks. By making it a copy instead of a steal, the Kirine player himself is unaffected. He can still do the same things as before, but it just makes playing against him a lot more engaging, and I think this was a really great change. Speaking of great changes, another one comes to the Alpha Legion, where I've always complained that the Pale Spear was much too powerful, especially when combined with Orbital Base, and they made a couple of changes. So first of all, they have reduced the cost of Pale Spear from 5 points to 4 points, which on the surface makes you think, well, what are they thinking about? But the ability of the spear has changed. It says deal 1 damage to a random enemy when you draw a card. This addresses one of the big challenges with facing the Pale Spear before, which is that there was no way to protect yourself against it. Now, by throwing out troops onto the board, you can actually help defend yourselves against a mass Pale Spear attack, and that really helps most warlords. Probably doesn't help all those Engrons out there, but those Engrons deserve the Pale Spear, really. Alright, so that's the Pale Spear change, and then sort of partnered with that is the devs had introduced a card a couple of patches ago, and I don't think they had quite appreciated how much it would interact with the Pale Spear. But from the neutral deck, I think it's a Chaos card, is it? Let's take a look here. Yep, Into the Warp. So Into the Warp used to be a card which was basically tailor-made for the Pale Spear, because it would return all of the tactics in your hand, and Alpha Legion decks would often have quite a lot of tactics to the deck. Now it has a hard cap of 4 tactics, so you're only able to do a maximum of 4 points of damage with Into the Warp, whereas before you could do up to, I think, 9 points of damage. So this was a great change as well. Couple more neutral changes which have happened. Let's clear the filter over there. Canis Vertex. Canis Vertex's shoulder has been nerfed. Before, it used to cost 1 point of energy per shoulder to put it into siege, and then you would spend 1 point of energy to deal 2 damage to a random target, and of course you could do that with each shoulder. Now, each shoulder costs 2 points of energy to put into siege, although it deals 3 points of damage. That means that before, Canis Vertex would spend a maximum of 4 points of energy on sieging across 2 turns, and would deal 4 points of damage for that. Now, Canis Vertex will spend a maximum of 8 points of energy sieging, so 2 points per shoulder per turn to siege up and then activate, and he'll deal only 6 points of damage out of all of that. So it's basically around a 25% reduction in shoulder damage, which is a pretty big nerf. I guess the devs must have felt that Canis Vertex is still being overpowered, and it'll be interesting to see what impact this has on his popularity in the ladder. I too personally felt that Canis Vertex was a little bit too strong before, and I think this shoulder change is going to put him into a good place where he should have been from the start. Alright, and the last change to the neutral cards is to Void Engagement. Now this is one that no one, I think, saw coming. Like, I hadn't heard anyone say, hey, you know what? I think Void Engagement does 1 point of damage too much. So it has the same energy cost as before, but instead of dealing 3 points of damage to the enemy warlord, it deals 2 points of damage. Even though I've been hurt a lot by this card, I felt that this was not quite needed. I'm not sure why the devs did that. I don't think it's going to make a giant change overall. It's just going to be really annoying to people who like using this in their deck, like me. Alright, and of course, the main change from this balance patch is the complete transformation, near complete transformation of the Death Guard. So, for the longest time, a lot of people felt the Death Guard's mechanic was weak and needed a revamp, but what the devs have ended up doing is something a little bit clever. They've kept the core mechanic of the Death Guard, but they've made it a bit more flexible. Alright, I'm going to leave the change to Killest Typhon until last, but what we're going to start with is Mortarion, actually. In his base form, he hasn't really changed much at all, but they've actually done one thing which I felt was really long overdue. If you go down to the demon form of Mortarion, in the picture he has wings. In the books he can fly. In the game, he couldn't do what other flying units did, which was be unstoppable and ignore front line. So the devs have gone ahead and fixed that. It's a really minor tweak. Most of the time with Demon Prince Mortarion, you're doing that massive healing on yourself, or just trying to poison a dangerous enemy unit. But it's a neat little effect. It's one of the things which bothered me every time I turned into Demon Morty in the past, so I like what they've done here. Alright, next up is one of the first cards in the game, Gores Net Squad. So these guys used to have an ability where they would do a lot of damage to a vehicle. So you would spend 5 energy and deal a whopping 8 damage to a vehicle. But now, as more and more things have been introduced into the game, they've added structures and Titan weapons to that. And I think that will make these guys very usable. They were very unpopular in the past because there were relatively few vehicles in the game. Even though the devs have added more vehicles, it still makes them very specialized. Now that they can hit structures or Titan weapons, you're going to see these getting used a lot more, I'm sure. Another minor change is to Osgard Squad. Before, these guys would be put into play and their rally ability would allow them to poison an enemy troop. Now, you can still do that, but you can also remove poison from a friendly unit. Now, that's Mortarion's ability anyway, but Osgard Squad now gives you a way for non-Mortarion Death Guard Warlords to remove poison if you want. Or, of course, you can just apply poison to your enemy instead. It adds a little bit of flexibility to these guys. I think most of the time, you'll still be using them like before to poison the enemy. Okay, next up, another bit of a minor tweak, Ignatius Grulgor. Before, his stats were 4 attack, 5 health. They've sort of now been reversed, which I like. It makes him a bit more offensive. And apart from that, there have been no real changes on him. So, a very, very minor tweak. I don't think it's going to make a gigantic difference. I almost wonder why they did that, but yeah, can't find anything wrong with it. He's still about as useful as he ever was before. Okay, next, a change to what used to be considered one of the most pointless cards in the game because it cost a lot and was very specialized, Defensive Maneuver. This was a very good change. It used to cost 4 energy, but its impact was very, very lackluster for that, especially if you're facing an enemy who just uses the Warlord alone, like Angron. You would have spent 4 energy to draw a single card, which is very inefficient. Now, at a cost of just 2 energy, I can actually see Defensive Maneuver being useful, and I think it's worth its legendary status at last. Alright. Next up, speaking of cards which no one used to use before, the Reaping. The Reaping used to just reduce the, I think, attack of enemy units for 1 turn, which was kind of lackluster. They've totally changed this card. At the very least, it's pretty handy as just a stun card. It doesn't affect the enemy warlord, but it allows you to stun an enemy troop. But if the enemy troop has poison, it then allows you to destroy that troop altogether. And of course, Mortarion in particular tends to like throwing a lot of poison around, so the Reaping turns into a hard removal card for him. Okay, next up is going to be First Wave. Extremely minor tweak to First Wave. It's a tactic which used to always make 3 Meldon squads appear in play, and in the past they used to all go on the same side of your Warlord. They've now changed that. They can show up in random spots. It's relatively minor because there's few abilities which target particular areas in this game, but I'm sure there's going to be times now where this makes a difference in someone's match, either in favor or against them. Next up, where's it gone down here? Spectre of Death. So this was always the Death Guard's hard removal card, and in the past what it used to do is destroy the target and spawn 2 Nurglings. Now the problem is spawning 2 Nurglings was not that helpful for most Warlords, because it meant the next turn you actually had 2 less energy than normal because of their maintenance cost. That's what I was looking for. But now Spectre of Death is even more useful. Destroy an enemy troop and poison adjacent troops. This is going to be critical for every Mortarion deck because you're trying to poison as many troops as possible with Mortarion. And the nice thing about that is in late game, there's a neat combo you can use to take out 2 powerful units with Spectre of Death. Drop this for 7 energy, destroy 1 target and poison another, and then you can drop the Reaping on top to finish off the one who was poisoned. So starting to set up some cool combos over there. And then we also have Mortarion's Resolve. These used to be a 10 energy card, and I would still occasionally use it from time to time, but they've actually made it really good now because it only goes down to 8 energy, meaning you can play Mortarion's Resolve while also using your Warlord's ability, because it allows you to, in a 10 energy turn, to use your Warlord ability and play Mortarion's Resolve. Or, of course, just play this earlier in the match in the 8 energy turn. So I like this change a lot. And the main event, as far as this balance change is concerned, Killest Typhon was often considered to be a very underwhelming Warlord. And his base ability and stats hasn't changed, but they have given him a really cool ability. And I like what the devs are doing here now, giving giving some of the non-Primarch Warlords a special one-off trick they can pull in the match. In the case of Killest Typhon, it's the Destroyer Plague. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. It's a 2 energy cost card, and it destroys a troop which has received poison. So it also has Reflection, meaning you can play it repeatedly in the match. There's a couple of ways this can actually be really useful. But one of the neat ones is when you combine it with a mass poison card, such as Death Cloud. Because if you poison all troops in play for 4 energy, and let's say you have 8 energy in total in your turn because you're playing it late game, you can poison everyone, and with Destroyer Plague, you can actually kill 2 immediately as well. Another thing it can do is allow you to remove a troop which is compromising you, like when the Alpha Legion play the really annoying guy who makes you take a point of damage each time you draw a card. Well, if you poison everything with Death Cloud, you can also actually no, I guess that doesn't make a difference because once it's poisoned it would die at the end of the turn. Whatever. Destroyer Plague, you're going to use it to kill the enemy troops basically after poisoning them. So I like it. I think it's going to make Typhon a lot more useful. On the ladder, I've actually lost already to a Killest Typhon player, so you're starting to see him get used quite a bit more. Anyhow, so that's all the balance changes. I think what I'm going to be doing is revisiting my Mortarion and trying to come up with a really poison heavy deck, taking advantage of many of the new abilities which are kicking in here. Alright, hope you guys find this little recap of the changes useful. I am still working on my Thousand Suns card list review, and that'll hopefully be coming out in the next couple of days. Until then, bye for now, guys.